stuff to happen. It's incredible.
Or a nightmare scenario could say.
Nightmare scenario is, you said it, that's the cliche you wanted.
If you wrote the book, people would never believe the plot. But does this mean it would have to be in part an insider job just to know how it all works?
Well, there must be somebody on board the aircraft to know how to steer them or drive them into the buildings. If you were a pilot and you had a gun at your head and they said, well, take me to that building, you knew you were going to die one way or the other, you wouldn't do it. You'd go the other way. But they must have had people who could fly. This is an inside job right down the line. And this is the whole thing about the problem. It's an inside job. There's people on the inside who are prepared to lose their lives to create some sort of great statement, and they have.
Well, Dr. Cornish described the United States as the most open city in the world. What possible measures can they take?
The United States is the most open country in the world, not the most open city. We're an open country as well. In democracy, you can't stop this stuff from happening unless you become like a Nazi state and stop you from doing these things. It's totally free. There's nothing to stop you from putting on a bomb inside a plane in Boston and going to New York. It's outrageous. The freedom you have is killing you, and that's the essence.
So you give an impression of helpless as Dr. Cornish, as a defence man. How would you react to that?
Well, I'd only say that my reading of this so far, and how little do we all know of what really happened, and we'll know very little, I suspect, for a very long time to come. But it does seem to me to have been an extremely well coordinated operation, but at the same time, in a very disturbing way, a not terribly complex one. And I think this is going to be the issue of discussion. Just how easy was it to get onto an airplane at an internal airplane?
5 aircraft be hijacked at the same time by the same people, coordinated like this, with people who are prepared to kill themselves by doing this sort of damage. It's outrageous. Who's done this? And who must be killed? If these people don't mind being killed themselves, how do you find them? The answer is to solve the political problem, not the aviation problem. It's the political problem that must be solved.
Political problem. Well, let's bring in our BBC's defence analyst, Jonathan Marcus. Jonathan, a thorny problem indeed. How do they begin to tackle it?
I think one very clear point is that the question of defence and tightening up security, whilst I'm sure it will be done, is not the answer. If you look at a society that is at the moment permanently under attack in this sort of way in Israel, they clearly stop a large number of suicide bombings, but they don't stop all of them. And there you have, you might call it a highly militarised society with the whole of society on alert, very large proportions of the country militarily trained and so on, and even they can't stop it. So I don't think the sole answer is clearly in defences. It's got to be in waging a much more effective intelligence war against these sorts of groups. That involves Western countries combining together, but also applying a leverage against those countries around the world who may offer these people, as we heard from Richard Pearl, some support, and trying to bring whatever pressure can be brought. And when you do identify targets, then obviously taking some action against them. But it's this is like sand running through people's hands.
But much more terrifying, because of course it's often said in Israel that all you need is a person willing to strap explosives to his body. It actually isn't a very sophisticated operation. Well, whereas this one, Dr. Cornish, is on a much different level, isn't it?
Well, again, it's on a very much different level, yes, but we become familiar with talking about terrorist attacks, the really big ones, the Canary Wharfs and so on, and the Oklahoma City being a spectacular. This isn't a spectacular, this is whatever lies beyond a spectacular, a multi-spectacular or something. But at the same time, it took a lot of coordination, a lot of planning, but I don't really think it was a terribly difficult thing in conception and in operation. I mean, it's audacious, as I think someone said earlier. To have hijacked 4 or 5 airplanes, fully fueled and so on. But in the end, your target was a very, very soft one.
But in terms of the history of terrorism, this brings it to a whole new level?
I think it does indeed, absolutely. This is entirely unprecedented.
Jonathan Marcus?
Oh, it is entirely unprecedented, and I think somebody's already said the world is a very different place after this attack. I mean, 186 people killed in the Oklahoma City bombing. If you just take the people on board these aircraft alone, that figure of casualties has already been exceeded.
Devastating indeed. Jonathan Marcus, Dr. Paul Cornish and Christopher Lockwood, thank you very much for joining us on a BBC World Service News special. I'm Lise Doucette, on a day being described as a day like no other.
Broadcasting from the University of Arizona, this is member-supported KUAT-FM 90.5 Tucson. We are in the midst of coverage worldwide from the BBC and here in Tucson locally about the tragic events that occurred in New York City, in Washington, D.C., and in Pennsylvania with the hijacking of 4 airliners and the resulting catastrophic damage and loss of life thereafter. Coming up tonight on KUAT Television Channel 6 at 6:30, Arizona Illustrated, Southern Arizona's news magazine, providing live coverage from the BBC Worldwide Television Service and PBS. There will be special local news updates at 3, 4, 5, and 6 o'clock with special edition of Arizona Illustrated, not at 6:30, but at 7 o'clock tonight. So that's tonight at 7 o'clock, a special edition of Arizona Illustrated on KUAT Television Channel 6, Southern Arizona's news magazine. We'll have more to come, including some information here in Tucson. We have a couple of candlelight vigils to tell you about, a joint interfaith prayer service at St. Francis in the Foothills Church at Swan and River Road. We also have a candlelight vigil here on the U of A campus tonight at 8 o'clock at the Newman Center, at the corner of 2nd and Cherry, and all folks are welcome to join in those as well. We return to BBC Headlines, followed by local news with Bobby Clark at 6 past the hour. It's 12:01.
BBC News with Guy Francis. A wave of attacks on New York and Washington has caused catastrophic destruction and heavy loss of life. Both towers of the huge World Trade Center in New York collapsed after hijacked airliners were flown into them. One eyewitness described what she saw.
We heard a big bang, and then we saw smoke coming out, and everybody started running out, and we saw the plane on the other side of the building, and there was smoke everywhere, and people are jumping out the windows. Over there, they're jumping out the windows, I guess because they're trying to save themselves. I don't know. And I don't know, everybody just doesn't know where to go. They won't let, everything is blocked off. You can't even, they're telling us to get out, but there's nowhere to go. And then I heard that another plane hit, and if you go over by there, you can see the people jumping out the window. They're jumping out the window right now. Oh my God.
No one has taken responsibility for the attacks, which created chaos and scenes of panic. In New York, the confusion was made much worse by